Good day. How's everyone doing? I'm Brian Lewis. I'm working with JTNS. I'm an instructor with JTNS, and today we're going to come to you and talk to you about hand tools, care, use, and inspection. Hand tools, tool safety is really important, and so that's what our discussion is going to be about, our presentation. Before we get started, and is our custom with JTNS, we like to ask anyone if there's been any near misses or accidents to talk about. So I'm not there, obviously, to talk to you about them. But if you have some near misses, some accidents that you all need to discuss, go ahead and pause the video. Just pause the video and discuss what you need to discuss. It's important to debrief in these situations and make sure everybody understands things that we can do better. So keep that in mind. All right. Hopefully there hadn't been a whole lot to discuss. And what we're going to do now is move right on in to hand tools, care, use, and inspection. So keep that in mind. So part of the presentation is we're going to ask ourselves, really, is this what we're going to do? We've all had the itch or the inclination to abuse our tools, and sometimes we ask our buddies to jump in and help us. But please, if somebody asks you to lay down and let them use your back while they rip a board with a handsaw, that's one of those things you just say no to. Just say no, right? So keep that in mind. So some of the tools we're going to talk about: pliers, hammers, screwdrivers, and wrenches. At some time or another, all these tools have been abused, and so we want to avoid abusing these things. We want to use the right tool for the right job. So keep that in mind. At any given time, I'm going to guess, if I ask for a raise of hands, everybody would say they've used pliers and wrenches as hammers and screwdrivers as chisels, but that's not what they're made for. Probably we've had a few people even strike hammers against another hammer, and that's not a good idea. You can crack those surfaces that you strike with, and the hammer can come apart. All these tools we've probably used when we shouldn't have, when the handles have gone bad, either split and decided to put some tape on them, or we've driven a nail down through the top of the handle to keep the head of the hammer still on the handle. None of these things are good. So keep that in mind. So when we talk about struck or hammered tools, there again, we want to use those appropriately, just like I said. Cutters, a lot of times people use cutters for different things, as wrenches sometimes, or they use an inappropriate cutter for the wrong material. Saws and knives. Well, I'll just say knives, probably the most dangerous tool you can have is a dull knife. Why? Because you bear down on that knife in an effort to cut the material you're working on, and when you do that, you make a way for you to cut yourself or your friend that's standing next to you watching. And so make sure your knives are sharp, make sure the saw blades are in good condition, and make sure that you're using your tools in the appropriate way. Digging and excavation tools. For those with us that are operators, you know that sometimes you use those that equipment is probably the best way for me to say it, in inappropriate ways. So keep that in mind, and always use your tools, your digging and excavation tools, the way you should. All right, make sure you do that. Safety glasses, goggles, hand protection, and head protection, PPE. Well, you need to be wearing safety glasses with side shields anytime there is a chance that something can fly into your eye. So anytime somebody's nailing something using a pneumatic powered tool, using a hydraulic powered tool, probably needs safety glasses with side shields. And when I say side shields, I don't mean those flimsy things that you see some of the people like engineers wear. All right, so you want these things to be impact resistant, you want them to have an ANSI Z rating on them. That's how you know that they're good for what they're for. Goggles typically are used for splash protection. So if you're having to pour or distribute a chemical, even a dust sometimes, doesn't have to be a liquid, probably want to have goggles on. Now they do make a few goggles that have impact protection, but not always from the side. So if you're going to try and use goggles for impact protection, make sure they're rated for that, because typically, like I said, it's for splash protection. Now, hand protection. Hand protection comes in a lot of different forms. There's good leather gloves. There's gloves that actually have some retroreflective tape on them or a stripe, so when you're flagging, to help give you a little bit more visibility out on the road. There are, of course, nitrile gloves and gloves for all different kinds of chemicals. If you're going to be using gloves to help keep chemicals off your hands, make sure that you do a little research and find out what is the best chemical resistant material. All right. Head protection. Head protection is important anytime you can be struck in the head. So keep that in mind. Keep your hard hats on. If you need a chin strap to keep them on your head, anything like that, make sure you do that as well. Now, another thing I'll say about the PPE is I ask everybody to remember that all PPE has its limitations. It just does. As far as chemical resistant gloves, at some point, all gloves have breakthrough where the chemical will go through the material. Safety glasses are great general protection to protect your eyes and your eye sockets. But, you know, they're not, they can be shattered. That's what I need to say. So keep that in mind. Head protection, those hard hats, make sure they're in good order. Make sure you follow the manufacturer's recommendations. Make sure you replace either the shell or the harness on the inside when you're supposed to. Having said that, somebody drops a pole on your head, that hard hat's not going to help you. So keep those things in mind. PPE is great. It is the last line of defense, and it does have limitations. The best piece of safety equipment you have is your noggin. So you need to be thinking about what you're doing, where you're doing it, and what's going on around you to protect yourself and everybody else. So, care of hand tools. Proper care of hand tools will help extend the life of the tool. There again, I use the example of a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver being used as a chisel. It's not meant to be a chisel. If you're going to use them as a chisel, you're going to tear it up, and you're going to have to move on and buy more tools. Clean the tools after each use or at the end of the work day. So there you go. You need to clean those tools and make sure as you're cleaning them, you're inspecting them. Put them back where they go, on the truck or in the toolbox. Lubricate all moving parts or joints of hand tools after cleaning. As the people that use excavators, backhoes, trackhoes will tell you, lubrication is an important part of those machines. So you want to lubricate all the parts that move, all the bearings at appropriate times, all that good stuff. Don't forget to lubricate things like pliers. They move too, and they need to be lubricated once in a while also. Saws and knives should be kept sharp. We've already talked about that a little bit, and I'll just say it again, that the most dangerous tool you can have is a dull knife. It's ergonomically a bad thing, and it increases the chances that you're going to cut yourself or your partner that's there with you. So keep that in mind. Sharp tools should be covered or sheathed. You don't leave them in the toolbox without a sheath on them, okay? You're just asking for somebody to get cut when they reach in there to grab something. Make sure you remember that. Cutter should be adjusted and sharpened daily. Keep that in mind. Struck or hammered tools should be dressed or discarded. Hand tools should be returned to the location from where they were retrieved. This is just a good practice to help people be more productive and less frustrated, right? Keep toolboxes and storage neatly organized. So every tool's got a place, and you need to put it in its place. That's what we need to do. That keeps everything nice, neat, tidy, so that we don't have people running around looking for stuff. Always follow the manufacturer's recommendations. So you got a car, hopefully you follow what the manufacturer tells you to do as far as changing the oil and all the good stuff that you have to do to keep that car running. Same way with tools. Same way with tools. Doesn't matter if they're track hose, backhoes, if they're knives, cutters, whatever they need, whatever they are, they need to be maintained the way the manufacturer asked you or requested you to do so in the operator's manual. Always wear the right PPE and follow the safety rules pertaining to hand tools. This is an important thing to do to protect both yourself and the people around you. Material in this program may not cover all the hand tools that you use in your facility, so keep that in mind. I know there's a lot of different tools that everybody uses and have different names for them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So just learn not to abuse those tools. Use the right tool for the right job. Wrenches are one of the most used hand tools. Main function is to turn nuts and bolts, and there's various types, styles, and makes of wrenches. They're also the most abused. The most abused. Everybody uses those things for hammers, and when you beat on stuff with them, they don't last long, right? Cheater bars. Yeah. So everybody here probably at some point in their life has used a cheater bar, but you're not supposed to use a cheater bar. Select a wrench that fits the nut or on the open end or the box end, and adjustable wrenches should be tightly adjusted to the nut and pulled so that the force is on one side of the fixed jaw. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Always pull when possible. Try to avoid over-torquing any bolt. Wrenches should not be altered. And plastic dip handles do not mean that the wrench is dielectric. All right, if it's going to be dielectric, it's going to have a stamp on it somewhere or labeled somewhere that it's dielectric. Just because it's got a plastic handle does not make it dielectric. So keep that in mind if you're working around electricity. Pliers, there are many types and sizes of pliers, and each are designed for specific use. There again, use the right plier for the right job. Always wear your proper PPE for the pliers. Never use the pliers as a hammer. Never use a cheater on the handle for greater leverage, and do not expose the pliers to excessive heat. You're just going to tear them up and they're going to break. They range from 6 1/4 to 9 1/2 inches if you're talking about side cutting pliers. Do not use on nuts or bolts, and do not rock pliers from side to side when cutting wire. Right? Keep that in mind. Sizes are typically 4 to 8 inches for long nose pliers, designed for electrical, telephone, and electronic use. They usually work with smaller gauge wire, and they can reach in awkward places, so they're a great tool to use. Great tool to use, but don't abuse them. Slip joint pliers. Slip joint capably increases the capacity of the range, can be used to hold nuts or bolts, and designed for a wide range of use involving gripping, turning, and bending. So those are great tools, and they can help you out quite a bit in having to have a bunch of different sets of pliers. Tongue and groove pliers got a great capacity. They have a tongue and groove adjustment used by a lot of industries. Grips have many different shapes. Now that this part of the PowerPoint talks about grips, I will throw something in here that's a little bit of ergonomics. You want long-handled tools. Short-handled tools puts a lot of pressure in the palm of your hand, and actually will cause some problems, and eventually can lead to carpal tunnel syndrome because the carpal tunnel nerve ends in the palm of your hand. So anytime you use your hand as a hammer and you're beating something with the palm of your hand, you're hurting that carpal tunnel nerve. Same deal if you use short-handled pliers, short-handled tools. You put a lot of pressure in the palm of your hand, and that causes ergonomic injury. Over time, it'll cause problems. Locking pliers, it's a combination tool. It's got locking jaws. It's not intended to replace wrenches and should never be used to support personnel. So sometimes people get a brighter or better idea, or so they think, and they think, well, I can use this tool for what I need to do. And it's not always a better idea, especially if you slip and fall. Snap ring retaining ring pliers, they're used on snap lock rings. They've got interchangeable tips. Use the correct tip for the right job, and use only intended for use. Keep that in mind. Hammers, always wear PPE. Anytime you're using a hammer, you should have safety glasses and side shields on to protect your eyes. Depending on if you're using the hammer or somebody around you or above you is using a hammer, you're probably going to need to have a hard hat on as well. It's one of the most widely used tools. It's also one of the most widely abused. There's all kinds of hammers. There's a framing hammers, roofing hammers, finishing hammers, ball peen hammers, and so I say all that to say use the right hammer for what you're using, for what you're trying to accomplish, okay? Use it for what you're trying to accomplish. So you want to strike squarely. You want to make sure you have the appropriate face size. You never strike hammer to hammer, and get rid of damaged or loose handles. Like we've talked about already, there's no amount of tape, no amount of nails you can drive in the top of that handle that will secure the head of the hammer. And so keep that in mind. Just move on. Get you a new handle, put it on there, or get rid of it. Get rid of it and go buy another one. It's not worth it. Not worth it. So anytime you see any kind of mushrooming, cracks, or chips in the head of the hammer, it's probably time to move on. Don't regrind, weld, or heat. Use the right hammer for the right job, and beware of backswings. There might be somebody behind you watching you, and if you're using a claw hammer or some kind of framing hammer or some kind of roofing hammer, man, that claw will dig into somebody. Or if you're one of these people that have put tape on your handles or use nails to keep the hammer on the handle, and that thing comes flying off, you're going to hit somebody and potentially kill them. So keep that in mind. By the way, this has been going on for a long time. You can go back in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament even has laws about if you kill your neighbor if the head of the hammer comes off the handle. So we're not the first ones to make bad decisions, but that's no excuse, right? So keep that in mind. Struck or hammered tools. Let's discussing what it means to have struck or hammered tools, okay? Hand tool hazards are usually caused by misuses and improper maintenance. So do not use when the wrenches jaws are sprung. Impact tools when the heads have been mushroomed. Tools with loose, cracked, or splintered handles. A screwdriver is a chisel. And tools with taped handles. They may be hiding cracks. Yeah, so keep that in mind. As we've talked about all of this stuff as we've gone along, keep all of this in mind. I'm going to say it, or I've already said it several times. I'll probably say some of this stuff several more times, but it's important. It's important. Struck or hammered tools, always wear your PPE like we've talked about. Keep the tools sharp. Avoid glancing blows. Use tools that are designed for the task, just like some of the stuff we've said on the other tools. Screwdrivers are probably the most, or the second most abused tool. The most common abuse, as I've already talked about, is used as a chisel. I can't be the only one that have seen people take their good screwdrivers, go to a bench or pedestal grinder, and put an edge on them to be used as a chisel. That's just not what they're designed for, and just avoid the tendency or the challenge to do it, right? Just avoid that. You always want to find the right screwdriver for the right job. So you've got all kinds of screwdrivers out there, flathead and Phillips head and who knows, Torx and everything else. So you find what fits best, both in size and style, and use that where you need to. Screwdrivers can have square shanks, cushion grips, pilot holes, interchangeable bits. All these things are common nowadays, and make sure that you use those as needed. The cushion grips is a wonderful thing. There again, you're trying to avoid ergonomic injury with cushion grips. So cushion grips really give you a little bit more surface area, and they fit more comfortably in the palm of your hand if you have to bear down and put a little torque on something. So keep that in mind. Don't hold work in your hand while you're trying to screw with a screwdriver. You slip, you're going to be running that screwdriver through you, and you don't want to do that. Don't use a screwdriver with a rounded tip. If they need to be replaced, get you a new screwdriver. Don't use a screwdriver on live electrical circuits. None of this stuff is a good idea, so keep that in mind. Do not use for prying stuff apart, punching holes in stuff. Don't use them for chiseling. We've already talked about that. Don't score them, and don't use them for scraping. Okay. Cutters. There's all kinds of cutters. They're for cutting hard materials. Each one of these things has the jaws on each one of these cutters has a capacity, and so you spring the jaws when you use a cutter that's not designed to be used on a particular piece of metal or any other piece of product that you got there, and you're trying to get her done and not using the right tool for the right job. So prying and twisting, you want to cut at right angles. Remember that stuff. Saws, there's all kinds of saws. There's hand saws, there's table saws, there's portable saws, there's chainsaws. All that stuff is important, right? It's important that you keep these things covered when they're not being used. I didn't mention bandsaws, but bandsaws are particularly bad about not having the unused portion of the blade guarded. So you want to guard those things. You want to put covers on any kind of handsaw or anything else like that. You will make sure you keep the safety parts of those saws in good working order so that the unused portion of these blades, like the circular saws and things like that, are keep you protected from those cutting edges, right? You want to keep them sharp. There again, dull knives are bad things. The same thing with chainsaws. If that chain gets dull, you start using it in ways you shouldn't. You start abusing the chainsaw, and before long you get yourself in trouble. So make sure they're secured, make sure you put them in the right position, and all that good stuff. Knives, all kinds of knives, so anything from a good work knife that has a razor blade in it, all the way to something that looks like something Rambo would use, right? So if any of those things, you keep them sheathed, keep them sharp, and when you cut with them, you want to cut away from yourself and away from other people, right? Cut away from yourself, cut away from other people. There's been a lot of people cut themselves badly or cut their friends, or maybe they're not your friends but your coworkers badly, and so that's not something you want to do. If you do it intentionally, we call it attempted murder in our society, so don't be doing that. Don't be doing that. Shovels. Digging and excavation tools. Shovels, there's all kinds of different shovels. Make sure you use the right shovel for the right job. Spud bars. You need to break up some rock, or pry it out. That's what you want to use a spud bar for. Post hole diggers. Make sure you use those correctly. They've got the handheld post hole diggers that give you a pretty good workout. So keep that in mind and pay attention to how you're using that stuff and protect your feet. They also have post hole diggers that a lot of people use with small tractors. And so I've seen people really hurt with those. So remember, if you're going to be using a post hole digger or auger that is mechanical and runs off a small farm tractor or something like that, that the knuckles need to be guarded. that the PTO needs to be guarded and the drive shaft needs to be guarded. That stuff gets a hold of your clothes, it will start tearing you up. And so keep that in mind. People have lost limbs because of things like that. The way to use an auger or post hole digger with a small farm tractor or something like that is to get you a shovel and dig a small pilot hole before you put the auger or the post hole digger into operation. And then you set that auger right down into the pilot hole that you've drilled, and that way the blade can grab hold of the earth and it can dig you a hole, and that's what you want. So keep that in mind. Spades, spoons, pickaxes, all these things. A lot of the stuff we've said about those, or a lot of the stuff we've said about hammers and split handles and modifying the handle so the head of it, of the spade or the spoon, pickaxe, whatever, will stay in place. Keep those things in mind. Measuring tapes. Measuring tapes are great stuff, right? So measure twice, cut once. Make sure you don't abuse those measuring tapes. Levels, squares, pry bars, nail pullers, axes, and hatchets. All these things have their place, and they do particular jobs. And make sure that you don't abuse those tools, and those tools will treat you right. So keep that in mind. Inspection. It's important to inspect your tools. Now, I talked about cleaning off your tools, and as you're cleaning them off and putting them in their proper place, you can do a really quick inspection while you're doing that. Keep that in mind. That's not a big deal. But you should have a normal time or a normal interval where you inspect all your tools and make sure that they are in good working order. And whether that's once a week, whether that's once every 2 weeks, once a month, whatever it is, you need to set aside some time and go through your tools, make sure they're appropriate, that there's not too much wear on them, and that anything that's got a cutting blade sharp, all the handles are in good working order, all that good stuff. It's always a good idea to document these things. To document them, it may cause a little extra work. Probably some people out there groaning when you heard me say document them. But documentation is always important because a lot of times if it's not documented, you really didn't do it, right? So keep that in mind. Know how to inspect them. Know what to look for. There again, when you buy this stuff, they all come with either an operator's manual or some kind of paper inside that tells you when to use it, when to discard it. Does it need to be sharp? Is it okay for it to be dull? When to lubricate it? All those good things. So keep that in mind. Importance of inspections. Maintain your safety. Maintain the performance of the tool. Reduce the cost of replacing tools. And it is required. It's required. It's something that needs to be done. Even if you have a specialty tool that there's no standard for, odds are the operator's manual or whatever written materials that came with the tool, they tell you, and the manufacturer requires you to look at the tool and make sure it's in good working order and to inspect it and how to maintain it. So keep that in mind. So we've talked about some frequencies for inspection, but like I said, it doesn't hurt to look at it right before you use it. Look at it daily when you clean it and put it up. Some people do monthly inspections, and some people do an annual inspection, and all that stuff's important. It's all important. Some of it can just be a quick glance. Some of it you probably want to document. So keep that in mind. Inspection documentation, well, when's it required? How often is it required? And what are the benefits to documenting the inspections? Well, each tool is going to have its own set of rules. And so don't be surprised if different tools are inspected at different intervals and have different maintenance schedules. You just sort of have to do what the manufacturer of that particular tool has told you is a good thing to do. So keep that in mind. The benefits to documenting inspections, it shows that you did your job, you did it well. And if something, Lord forbid, ever happens, then you have a document that shows that you've been doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So take the time to be safe. You probably heard me say before that our military teaches our people that go into urban combat situations that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Every one of us has a tendency to jump in and get something done as quick as we can when we want to get it done, right? So sometimes we have to fight that tendency and make sure that we're not being lazy, but that we're being thorough and we're doing the right thing. It doesn't help anybody if you finish early, but some other crew or someone else has to go behind you and fix what you've made a mistake by moving too fast. So maybe moving slow is not the right thing to say, but moving with purpose is the right thing to say. So if you move with purpose, what you're going to do is you're going to move smoothly. And when you move with purpose and you move smoothly, things get done. Nobody has to come behind you and fix them. And it's faster. It's faster. It's a good use of resources. So keep that in mind. So what are your responsibilities? Well, in the general industry, OSHA 1910 242A, under general requirements, it says each employer shall be responsible for the safe condition of tools and equipment used by employees, including tools and equipment which may be furnished by employees. So it doesn't matter if the employer supplies you tools or you bring your own tools from home, right? The employer's responsible for making sure that they're in good condition. So if you start bringing your tools from home, or you supply your own tools, you're going to have to keep that in mind. You want to look at the handles. Make sure the handles are in good order, like we've already talked about several times. Make sure the heads are in good order. Make sure any kind of power takeoff, any kind of rotating shaft, any kind of chainsaw, anything that has power equipment in it, make sure it's in good working order. Make sure the jaws have not sprung. Make sure the joints have not sprung on any kind of pliers or cutting tools. Make sure the jaws are in good working order, that sort of thing. Make sure the edges are sharp and the edges are appropriate. They have the right amount of grip in them. Make sure the ends, the tips, and the pivot points and joints are all in good shape. This is all important. There are 5 steps to good tool safety, right? So 1, check your tools regularly for wear and damage. Use the correct tool for the job. Keep your tools clean and good condition. Use appropriate safety equipment. And keep your hands clear of moving parts. Remember, I can't emphasize enough, any kind of knuckle, any kind of rotating equipment that delivers power or saw, you want to stay clear of that stuff. You all know that, right? So tools come with no spare parts. Make sure yours last a lifetime. There's a lot of people that have lost their fingers. Some of them have been lucky and they've been able to be reattached, but some of them not so lucky. So keep those things in mind. Make sure that you do what you need to do to protect yourself and all that good stuff. All right, now that we're finished, I'm sure y'all are happy for that. If you have any questions, please make sure that you discuss among yourselves whatever questions you have. A lot of times we as adults can learn a tremendous amount from each other and the stories we tell, so keep that in mind. If you have any questions that you feel you need to contact us, please contact me. Your safety director knows how to get in touch with me. You probably want to go through your safety director because your safety director or safety manager may already know the question, and especially if it has to do something with your organization's work rules. their work rules. You have to follow their work rules. So keep that in mind. Thank you all. Have a great day, and talk to you all in another video, or hopefully in person. Bye.